I'd learned to be invisible in 6 months. Not difficult when you're dressed in a gray uniform that screams staff, carrying a tray of coffee cups through rooms where men discuss things that could get you killed for overhearing. I'd perfected the art of looking down, moving quietly, becoming part of the furniture in Dante Moretti's penthouse. The trick was simple. Never make eye contact. Never speak unless spoken to. And above all, never remind them you're human. It kept me alive. It kept me safe. Until today. Hey, Maid girl. The voice was slurred, entitled, coming from behind me as I collected empty glasses from the living room. Dante was in his office with Marco, going over shipment routes or territory disputes, or whatever it was that required 2 hours of closed-door conversation. His 3 guests, associates from Chicago, in town for business, had been drinking steadily since lunch. I didn't turn around. "Can I get you something, sir?" Footsteps. Too close. The smell of expensive whiskey and cheaper cologne invaded my space. "Yeah. You can stop pretending you don't hear us talking about you." My stomach nodded. I'd heard them, of course. The comments about my legs, my ass, speculation about whether Moretti was sleeping with the help. I'd ignored it all, just like I ignored everything else in this apartment that wasn't my business. I should get back to the kitchen. I moved toward the door, tray balanced carefully. A hand clamped around my wrist, hard. Hard enough that I heard something crack before I felt the pain. "We're not done talking to you." I spun, instinct overriding 6 months of training to be docile, to be nothing. "Let go of me." There were 3 of them. The one holding my wrist, tall, sandy-haired with a scar through his eyebrow, smiled like I'd just made his day more interesting. His friends moved to flank me, blocking my path to the kitchen, to Dante's office, to anywhere that wasn't this corner of the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city that wouldn't hear me scream. "Dante doesn't let us touch his toys?" Scarface pulled me closer, his breath hot against my face. "That's not very hospitable." "I'm not—" The words died when his other hand rose. The slap came fast and sharp, snapping my head to the side. My lip split against my teeth, copper flooding my mouth. The tray slipped from my numb fingers, crystal glasses exploding against marble in a percussion of destruction that seemed to echo forever. I hit the floor a second later, palms landing in the wreckage. Glass bit deep into my skin, bright pain that felt distant compared to the ringing in my ears and the metallic taste on my tongue. "Clumsy," one of them laughed. "Guess Moretti doesn't train his staff very well." Through the fog of shock, I heard another sound. Footsteps. Different from before. Measured, controlled, carrying a weight that made the air pressure change. The living room door had opened. I didn't need to look up to know who stood there. I'd memorized the cadence of Dante Moretti's walk months ago, the way conversations died when he entered a room, the particular quality of silence that followed him like a shadow. Sophia. My name. He never used my name in front of others, never acknowledged I was anything more than the woman who cleaned his home and served his coffee, and existed in the background of his dangerous life. I looked up, blood dripping from my split lip onto my gray uniform, glass embedded in my palms, and met ice blue eyes that held something I'd never seen before. Murder. Not anger, not even rage. Something colder, more absolute. The kind of expression that meant bodies were about to drop and consequences were irrelevant. Dante's gaze never left the 3 men as he crossed the living room with predatory grace. His voice, when he spoke again, was barely above a whisper, which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. "Who did this to you?" It wasn't really a question. He'd watched them corner me, had probably heard everything through his office door, but he wanted them to understand what was about to happen. Wanted me to witness what it meant to be under Dante Moretti's protection. Wanted the whole city to know, I realized with sudden, crystalline clarity, that I'd never been just his maid. Behind him, Marco appeared in the doorway, hand already moving toward the gun holstered at his side. 3 more men materialized from somewhere. Dante's soldiers, always close, always ready. The man who'd hit me tried to smile, tried to play it off. "Hey, boss, we were just on your knees." 2 words, spoken softly, obeyed instantly. All 3 of them dropped, faces draining of color as they finally understood what I'd known from the moment Dante said my name. They were already dead. The method was the only question remaining. Dante crouched beside me, his hand gentle on my chin, tilting my face toward the light. His thumb brushed my split lip with devastating tenderness. "Sophia, tell me." My voice came out steady despite the trembling in my hands. The one with the scar grabbed me. The tall one hit me. He nodded once, as if I'd just confirmed something he'd already decided. Then he stood, removing his phone from his pocket with the calm deliberation of a man about to end the world. "Marco," he said, eyes still fixed on the 3 kneeling men. "Call everyone. Every soldier, every associate, every man who works for me or wants to continue breathing in this city." "Yes, sir." Dante began to dial, and in the pause before someone answered, I heard one of the men whimper. The last thing I saw before darkness crept in at the edges of my vision was Dante's face, beautiful and terrible in its controlled fury, as he spoke into the phone. "We have a problem, and everyone needs to know what happens when you touch what's mine." I didn't pass out. I wanted to. God, I wanted the blissful escape of unconsciousness, but shock and adrenaline kept me brutally present for everything that followed. Dante's voice was too low for me to hear the actual conversation, but I watched his free hand curl into a fist so tight his knuckles went white. He spoke in Italian, rapid and clipped, the language he only used when violence was imminent. Behind him, Marco was already making calls of his own, his expression grim. "Don't move," Dante said to me, ending his call. Not a command, a plea wrapped in authority. I couldn't have moved if I wanted to. Blood seeped through the kitchen towel someone had wrapped around my hands, and my face throbbed with each heartbeat. The 3 men remained on their knees, surrounded now by Dante's soldiers who'd appeared like smoke, armed and stone-faced. The one who'd hit me, tall, arrogant 20 minutes ago, looked gray. "Boss, listen, we didn't know she was important. We thought—" "You thought wrong." Dante crouched before them, his voice conversational, friendly even, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "You thought she was nobody, just staff, someone you could touch without consequence. She's a maid," Scarface tried, desperation creeping into his tone. "How were we supposed to—" The sound of Dante's fist connecting with the man's jaw echoed through the penthouse. He went down hard, blood spraying from his mouth, and didn't get back up. Dante stood slowly, flexing his hand. His gaze swept the room. More men had arrived, at least 20 now, crowding into the living room. Some I recognized. Most I didn't. All of them looked at me with something new in their eyes. Recognition, understanding, fear. "Spread the word," Dante said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Anyone who touches her, looks at her wrong, breathes near her without my permission. Their entire family answers to me. Not just them. Everyone they love." Silence. Absolute and suffocating. "I don't care if you've worked for me for 20 years or 20 minutes. I don't care what you thought you knew about her." His eyes found mine across the room, held for a beat that made my breath catch. "She is under my protection. That means she's untouchable. That means she's more valuable than any shipment, any territory, any alliance." One of the kneeling men, the 3rd one who'd watched and laughed but hadn't participated, found his voice. "Sir, with respect, we didn't realize she was— What is she to you exactly?" The question hung in the air. I saw Marco tense, saw every man in the room lean in slightly, hungry for the answer that would finally explain why their boss kept a pretty maid in his penthouse. Why she lived here instead of commuting like normal staff. Why Dante Moretti was currently threatening to destroy families over a split lip and some broken glass. Dante's smile was razor sharp. Dangerous. She's mine. That's all you need to know. My stomach dropped. The carefully maintained lie, the fiction that had kept me safe for 6 months, shattered in front of 20 witnesses who would spread this story through every bar, every warehouse, every dark corner where Dante's influence reached, which meant everywhere. Take them, Dante gestured to the 3 men. I'll decide what happens to them later. His soldiers moved efficiently, hauling the men to their feet. As they were dragged toward the elevator, Scarface tried one last time. Moretti, please. We have families. So does she, Dante cut him off. She had a father who was worth more than all 3 of you combined, who died protecting something you're not worthy to understand. Now get them out of my sight before I forget I'm a civilized man. The elevator doors closed on their pleading. The assembled men began to disperse, phones already out, spreading the word just as Dante had ordered. Within the hour, every criminal enterprise in the city would know. Sophia Romano wasn't just the maid. Marco approached, his expression careful. The doctor is on his way. And Dante, the Costas are going to hear about this. Good. Dante's jaw clenched. Let them hear. Let everyone hear. They'll see it as weakness. You're showing them she matters. She does matter. Dante turned to where I still sat on his chair, blood-stained and shaking. And anyone who thinks protecting what's mine is weakness can come test that theory personally. Marco left, shaking his head. The room emptied. Suddenly it was just us. Dante Moretti and the woman whose existence he'd just announced to the criminal underworld. He crossed to me slowly, kneeling so we were eye level. Up close I could see the tension in his jaw, the barely controlled fury still simmering beneath his calm exterior. That was stupid, I whispered. Now they'll know I'm a target. His hand came up to cup my uninjured cheek, thumb tracing gentle circles that contradicted everything I'd just witnessed. They already knew, Sophia. Your father's enemies have been searching for you for 3 years. I just made sure they understand the cost of finding you. What cost? His smile held no warmth. Everything. I need to take you to the hospital. Dante's voice was steady, controlled, but I heard the thread of urgency beneath it. No. His eyebrows rose slightly. In 6 months, I'd never contradicted him. Never pushed back. The invisible maid didn't argue with the mafia boss who controlled half the city. But I wasn't invisible anymore. Sophia, the moment we leave, those men die. I met his ice blue gaze, refusing to flinch. Don't tell me I'm wrong. Silence stretched between us. Then, surprisingly, his lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. You're not wrong. I want answers first. The word surprised me as much as him. 6 months I've been here. 6 months of pretending to be nobody. And now you're ready to start a war over me. My voice cracked. Why? Dante studied me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. Then he turned to the handful of men still lingering in the penthouse. Out. All of you. They left without question. Even Marco hesitated only a second before nodding and disappearing into the hallway. The door clicked shut, and suddenly the massive penthouse felt impossibly small. Dante moved to his desk, opening a drawer and retrieving a first aid kit that looked professional grade. Medical scissors, tweezers, antiseptic, sutures, tools for a man who couldn't go to hospitals. He pulled a chair close to mine and sat, then did something that stole the breath from my lungs. He knelt. The most powerful man in the city, wearing a $3,000 suit, knelt on his own marble floor and reached for my bloodied hands with a gentleness that made my eyes burn. This will hurt, he said quietly, positioning my palm under the light. I know. He worked in silence, using the tweezers to extract glass shards embedded in my skin. Each piece clinked against a metal tray, a sound that would probably haunt me later. His touch was sure, practiced. He'd done this before. Your father saved my life. His voice was low, almost hypnotic. 3 years ago, I was younger, more reckless, thought I was untouchable, walked into an ambush in the warehouse district. I watched his face as he worked, saw the shadow of memory cross his features. Salvatore Romano wasn't even supposed to be there that night, but he had a sense about these things. Dante's jaw clenched. He took 2 bullets meant for me, died in my arms before the ambulance arrived. My father, dead for 3 years, and I'd spent that time running, hiding, becoming no one. I didn't know he worked for you. He didn't. He was... Dante paused, extracting another shard. He was my friend, the only real one I've ever had. The admission hung between us, vulnerable and raw. Before he died, he made me swear something. Dante's eyes lifted to mine. That I'd find you, protect you. His daughter, who disappeared after his funeral, terrified his enemies would come for her next. And so you brought me here. Understanding dawned. Made me your maid. Made you invisible, he corrected. The best hiding place is in plain sight. No one looks twice at staff, and I could keep you close, keep you safe. And now? My voice was barely a whisper. Now everyone knows. Now everyone knows you're under my protection. He set down the tweezers, reaching for antiseptic. Which means you're a target again. But at least they'll understand the cost of touching you, I hissed as the antiseptic hit open wounds. You're going to kill them. Those 3 men. Yes. No hesitation. No justification. Just simple truth. Because of me. Because they hurt you. His hands were steady as he wrapped gauze around my palms. There's a difference. Is there? He looked up, and the intensity in his gaze made my heart stutter. Your father died protecting me. I live with that every day. So yes, Sophia, when someone hurts you, when someone even thinks about hurting you, his voice dropped to something dark and absolute. There's a very clear difference between justice and choice. This is both. He finished bandaging my hands, then stood, extending one hand to help me up. Now we're going to the hospital, the private clinic. They'll check for concussion, make sure nothing's broken. Your men can wait. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'm driving you myself. No guards, no convoy, just the promise implicit in that statement. For the next hour, I wasn't his obligation or his friend's daughter or a piece on his chessboard. I was someone worth his personal attention. We took the private elevator down to the garage where a sleek black Maserati waited. He opened the passenger door for me, a gesture that felt strangely normal after everything that had happened. As we pulled out onto the street, the city lights blurring past, I realized something that should have terrified me but didn't. For 6 months, I'd seen Dante Moretti as my employer. Dangerous, powerful, untouchable. But the man beside me, hands steady on the wheel, jaw tight with controlled fury on my behalf, this was someone different. This was the man my father had called friend. And maybe, I thought, as he glanced over to make sure I was okay, something more. The private clinic was pristine and silent, the kind of place where discretion cost more than treatment. A doctor with silver hair and steady hands stitched my palms while Dante stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in rapid Italian. 17 stitches total, the doctor said, tying off the last suture. Keep them dry for 48 hours. Come back in 10 days for removal. I nodded, watching Dante's reflection in the darkened window. He'd been on the phone for 20 minutes, making call after call, his voice never rising but carrying that particular quality of absolute authority. Whatever he was arranging, it wasn't medical care. We drove back to the penthouse in silence. It was past midnight now, the city sprawling below us in rivers of light. Dante's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "What did you do?" I finally asked. "What needed to be done?" "That's not an answer." His jaw clenched. "Those men are alive. For now. That's more mercy than they deserve." The elevator ride up felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, Marco was waiting, his expression carefully neutral. "It's done," he said quietly. "Delivered to the Costa's warehouse on 5th, to the Salvatore's place in Brooklyn, and to Petrov's club downtown." Dante nodded. "Responses?" "Confusion, anger, fear." Marco's eyes flicked to me. The message was clear. I didn't ask what message. Some part of me didn't want to know. "Sophia." Marco's tone was gentler than I'd ever heard it. "Your room is ready." My room? I'd been sleeping in a tiny space off the kitchen, more closet than bedroom, but it had been mine. "The guest suite," Dante said. "It's yours now." He led me down the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times while carrying fresh linens and cleaning supplies. The door at the end, always locked, always off limits, stood open. The room beyond was stunning, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a king-sized bed with cream linens, furniture that whispered expensive taste. But it was the details that made my stomach knot. New locks on the door, heavy industrial grade, reinforced windows with security film. A panic button installed on the nightstand, red and obvious. A cage. A beautiful, comfortable cage. "There are clothes in the closet," Dante said from the doorway. "Your size, and toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything else, I need answers." I turned to face him. Marco said something about a message. What message? He was silent for a long moment. Then, "The 3 men who touched you were delivered to warehouses owned by my rivals. Alive, but marked." "Marked how?" "With words, carved into their backs." His expression was unreadable. "She belongs to Moretti." The room tilted slightly. "You started a war." I made a statement. He moved into the room, closing the door behind him. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I gestured at the panic button, the reinforced windows. "Because it looks like you just painted a target on my back and locked me in a fortress. I made you visible. There's no taking that back." His voice was quiet but firm. "Your father's enemies have been searching for you for 3 years. The Costas, the Salvatores, the Russians. They all wanted leverage against Salvatore Romano's legacy. Now they know where you are, because you told them. Because they would have found out eventually." His control cracked slightly, voice rising. "Those 3 men in my living room? You think they'd keep quiet? You think they wouldn't have sold that information the moment they sobered up?" I stared at him, my bandaged hands throbbing. So this was inevitable. "Yes." He ran a hand through his dark hair, disheveling it. "I'm sorry. I wanted to keep you hidden longer. Give you more time before..." He gestured vaguely at the security measures. "Before this. Before I became a prisoner. Before you became my responsibility." He closed the distance between us. "There's a difference, Sophia. You keep saying that there's a difference. But I don't see it." I moved to the window, staring out at the city that suddenly felt very far away. "I didn't ask you to burn down the city for me." His response came from directly behind me, close enough that I felt the heat of him. "You didn't have to." I caught his reflection in the glass, standing too close, eyes too intense, every line of his body screaming possession and protection in equal measure. "Your father asked me to keep you safe," he continued softly. "And I've failed at that for 6 months. Let men walk past you, ignore you, treat you like furniture. But the moment someone hurt you..." His voice dropped to something dark. That ends. That ends now. I turned to face him. And if I want to leave? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe. Or fear. Then you leave. I won't stop you. He stepped back, creating distance that felt like miles. But know this. The moment you walk out that door, every enemy your father ever made will be hunting you. Without my protection. Without my resources. So I'm trapped. You're safe. He moved to the door, hand on the handle. There's a difference. The door closed behind him with a soft click. I was alone in my beautiful cage, watching the city lights blur through tears I refused to let fall. 3 days passed in my gilded cage. 3 days of meals delivered to my door, of staring out windows at a city I could no longer walk through freely, of Dante's men nodding respectfully when they passed, no longer ignoring me, but watching me like I was made of glass. On the 4th day, Dante knocked. I'd learned his knock. 2 sharp raps, authoritative but not aggressive. When I opened the door, he stood in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary as his maid. I need you tonight, he said without preamble. My stomach flipped. For what? Dinner. My associates need to see that you're under my protection. That you're... He paused, choosing words carefully. Untouchable. So I'm a prop. You're a statement. His jaw tightened. There's a difference. I almost laughed at his favorite phrase, but the sound died in my throat. And if I refuse? Then they'll think I'm weak, that my protection is negotiable. His ice blue eyes held mine. And someone will test that theory. Probably violently. So not really a choice. An hour later, I stood before the mirror in a dress that had appeared in my closet. Emerald silk that clung to every curve, designer label, perfectly tailored. He'd known my size, had probably known it for months. The face staring back at me was a stranger's. The split lip had healed to a faint pink line. The bruise on my cheekbone had faded to yellow. But it was my eyes that looked different. Harder, more aware. 6 months ago, I'd been invisible. Now I was about to become unforgettable. Dante was waiting in the living room, and when I entered, something flickered across his face. Appreciation. Possession. Pride. You look... He stopped, cleared his throat. Perfect. The dining room had been transformed. Crystal gleamed under chandelier light. 18 place settings arranged with military precision. And already, men in expensive suits were arriving, their conversations dying the moment they saw me. I recognized some of them. Had served them coffee while they discussed shipments and territories and bodies that needed disappearing. They'd looked through me then, past me, never really seeing. Now they stared. Dante's hand settled on the small of my back, possessive and warm through the thin silk. Gentlemen, I believe you all know Sophia. The silence was deafening. He led me to the head of the table, pulling out the chair beside his, not across from him, not down the table, but right next to him, where everyone could see his hand rest on the back of my chair, claiming me without words. Dinner was served by new staff I didn't recognize. The conversation was stilted, careful, everyone hyper-aware of my presence. Halfway through the second course, a younger man, Dante called him Carlo, cleared his throat. Boss, about the other day. We wanted to apologize for... No. Dante's voice was soft, but absolute. He continued cutting his steak with surgical precision. Apologies mean nothing. Carlo paled. Sir, we didn't know. You didn't ask. Dante set down his knife, the sound of silver on china sharp in the quiet room. You saw someone in my home and assumed she was disposable. That tells me everything about your judgment. An older man spoke up, his accent thick Italian. Dante, we understand now. She's important to you. She's under my protection. Dante's hand moved from my chair to my shoulder, a gesture so casual and yet so possessive that I felt every eye on us, which should have been obvious from the fact that she lived here. But apparently I've been too subtle. How should we refer to her? This from a young underboss I didn't know, his voice carefully neutral. Dante's smile was razor-sharp, dangerous. Miss Romano, and if you're very, very careful, Sophia. The message was clear. My first name was a privilege, not a right. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of watchful eyes and careful conversation. When it finally ended, I escaped to the terrace, needing air, needing space from the performance we'd just given. The city stretched below, indifferent to the power plays and territorial claims happening in penthouses above. You did well. Dante's voice came from behind me. I didn't turn. I sat there like a doll while you displayed me. I protected you. He moved to stand beside me at the railing. There's a difference. Stop saying that. I finally looked at him. Stop pretending this is all for my benefit. You're doing this because you want to, because it serves your purposes. You're right. The admission surprised me. I am doing this because I want to, because they hurt you, and I can't let that stand. Why? The question burst out, desperate. You barely know me. 6 months of me bringing you coffee and cleaning your home. That's not knowing someone. He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the lights. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more raw than I'd ever heard it. I know you rearrange my books by author when you think I won't notice. I know you sing quietly when you think no one can hear. Old Italian songs your father must have taught you. I know you skip lunch when money's tight, but you never miss sending money to someone in Baltimore. Your grandmother, I'm guessing. I stared at him, heart pounding. I know you're terrified of storms, but you stand at the window during them anyway. I know you cry sometimes in the kitchen late at night, when you think everyone's asleep. His eyes met mine. I know enough, Sophia. I know enough to understand what I'm protecting isn't just my friend's daughter. Then what am I? His hand came up, cupping my cheek with devastating gentleness. Mine. The bomb was discovered at 3 a.m. I woke to shouting, running footsteps, and Dante bursting into my room without knocking. He was dressed but disheveled, phone pressed to his ear, eyes wild with something I'd never seen before. Fear. Get dressed, now, comfortable clothes, nothing fancy. He ended his call, already moving to my closet and pulling out jeans, a sweater. We're leaving. What's happening? Parking garage. They found a device attached to my car. His voice was clipped, controlled, but I heard the fury underneath. It's been defused, but the message is clear. My hands shook as I changed behind the bathroom door. Message? Your father's enemies know you're here, and they're willing to blow up half the building to get to you. 10 minutes later, I was in an SUV surrounded by armed men, watching the city disappear behind us as we headed north. Dante sat beside me, silent and tense, his hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine, checking I was real, I was safe, I was still there. Dawn broke over countryside I didn't recognize. We turned onto a private road that wound through forests thick with old-growth trees, and then, emerging from the woods like something out of a dream, stood a mansion that made the penthouse look modest. Stone and glass, modern lines softened by strategic landscaping, surrounded by grounds that seemed to stretch forever. Armed men patrolled the perimeter. Cameras tracked our approach. A fortress. This is your home? I asked as we pulled up to the entrance. One of them. Dante helped me out of the SUV. The most secure. I traded one cage for another, but this cage had gardens that bloomed despite the autumn chill, a library with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private lake, and a pool that would reflect stars when night fell. It was beautiful. It was prison. 3 days passed. Dante was gone most of the time, dealing with the fallout, Marco said. handling the families who thought they could strike at him through me. I wandered the grounds with guards shadowing my every step, feeling like a ghost in someone else's dream. On the fourth evening, Marco found me in the garden, staring at the lake as the sun set in bands of orange and gold. "You need to understand something," he said without preamble, sitting on the bench beside me. "About Dante, about what you mean to him." I kept my eyes on the water. "I'm his friend's daughter, his obligation." Salvatore was the only man Dante ever called friend. Marco's voice was heavy with memory. "When your father died, Dante swore on his grave he'd keep you safe." "I was there, I heard the promise." He paused. "But this? Moving you here, starting wars with 3 families, burning bridges he spent years building? This isn't obligation, Sophia." I finally looked at him. "Then what is it?" Marco's smile was sad. "Something he's not ready to name. Maybe something he doesn't know how to name." He stood, preparing to leave. "Your father saved his life. But you? You're bringing it back." That night, unable to sleep, I wandered the halls until I found light spilling from beneath a door. Dante's study. I knocked softly. "Come in." He sat behind an enormous desk, papers spread before him, laptop glowing. He'd loosened his tie, rolled up his sleeves, and there were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there a week ago. "You should be sleeping," he said, but didn't sound angry. I wasn't. "So should you." I moved into the room, drawn by something I couldn't name. "How long are we staying here?" "As long as it takes to neutralize the threat." "And how long is that?" He set down his pen, finally looking at me fully. "Weeks, maybe months." "Months." I sank into the chair across from him. "Months of hiding while you fight wars I don't understand. I'm keeping you alive. I know. And I did. But that didn't make it easier. Can I ask you something?" "Anything." The word was immediate. Absolute. It gave me courage. "Do you see me as your friend's daughter?" I met his ice blue gaze. "Or as something more?" The silence stretched. Outside, night birds called. Inside, I heard only my heartbeat and his breathing. Finally he spoke, his voice rough with honesty that sounded like it cost him. I wish I could say the former. It would be simpler. He stood, moving around the desk but stopping just out of reach. "It would be easier if you were just Salvatore's daughter, just someone I'm protecting out of debt and honor. But I'm not. No." The word was barely a whisper. "You're not." The space between us felt electric, dangerous, full of everything we weren't saying. "Then what am I, Dante?" His jaw clenched. "You're the reason I can't sleep. The reason I'm starting wars I can't afford. The reason I moved you here where I can see you, know you're safe, keep you close." He finally closed the distance, his hand coming up to trace my cheek. "You're everything I shouldn't want, and the only thing I can't stop thinking about." My breath caught. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. The convoy was supposed to be safe. 3 SUVs, armed guards, a route known only to Dante's inner circle. I was being transferred to a doctor's appointment in the city. My stitches needed removal, and Dante had insisted on a specialist. We were 15 minutes from the estate when the first shot shattered the rear window. Glass exploded inward. Someone shoved me to the floor as the SUV swerved violently. More gunshots, the distinctive crack of high-powered rifles. Our driver shouted into his radio, words I couldn't hear over the pounding of my heart. Then we were moving faster, tires squealing, the vehicle fishtailing as we raced back toward the estate. I stayed pressed to the floor, hands over my head, tasting blood where I'd bitten my tongue. We made it back. Barely. Dante was waiting when they pulled me from the SUV, his face sheet white, hands immediately on me, checking for injuries even as his men swarmed to secure the perimeter. "Inside, now." He practically dragged me into the house, not stopping until we were in his study with the door locked. "There's a mole." His voice was deadly quiet. "Someone told them which route we'd take, which vehicle you'd be in." I sank into a chair, shaking. "How many routes were there?" 6. We chose one at random 30 minutes before departure. His hand slammed down on the desk, making me flinch. "Only 5 people knew which one, meaning someone I trust, someone close to me is feeding them information." The days that followed were suffocating. Dante became paranoid, controlling, barely letting me out of his sight. He moved into the room next to mine, posted guards outside my door 24 hours, insisted on personally checking every meal before I ate it. I understood the fear, but understanding didn't make it easier to breathe. A week in, I couldn't take it anymore. "I'm going for a walk," I announced, heading for the garden. "No." Dante appeared in the hallway, blocking my path. "It's not safe. It's your property. There are 20 armed men out there. Someone on my payroll just tried to kill you. So I'm supposed to stay locked in this house forever?" My voice rose. "I'm suffocating, Dante. You're alive." His eyes flashed. "There's a difference." "Stop saying that." I tried to push past him. "Stop acting like this is all for my benefit when really you're just what?" He caught my arm. "Trying to keep you breathing? Trying to make sure your father's sacrifice wasn't for nothing? Trying to control me." The words burst out, raw and desperate. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask you to make me visible, to start wars, to lock me up like some precious object you can't bear to lose." "You think I want this?" His control cracked, voice rising to match mine. "You think I want to be terrified every second that someone will get to you? That I'll fail him again? Fail you? I can't live like this. Then what do you want from me?" He stepped closer, crowding me against the wall. "Tell me what you want, Sophia, because I'm trying. I'm trying so goddamn hard to keep you safe and you're fighting me at every turn." "I want to leave." The words came out choked. "I want to go somewhere you can't follow, where no one knows my name, where I'm not responsible for wars and death and no. You can't stop me. Watch me." He moved to block the hallway entirely. "You walk out that door, you die. Is your freedom worth more than your life?" I slapped him. The crack echoed in the silence. His head snapped to the side, a red mark blooming on his cheek. He stood there, not moving, not speaking, just breathing hard. "I hate you," I whispered, but even I could hear the lie in it. He looked at me then, and what I saw in his eyes made my breath catch. Pain, fear, desperation. "No, you don't." Then he kissed me, or I kissed him. Later I wouldn't be able to say who moved first. Only that, suddenly his hands were in my hair, my fists were gripping his shirt, and we were crashing together like a storm finally breaking. It was furious, desperate. Everything we'd been holding back for months. All the tension, the fear, the want we'd both been denying. When we broke apart, both gasping for air, he rested his forehead against mine. "I can't lose you." His voice cracked. "I can't. Do you understand? I can't." My hands were still fisted in his shirt. "I know." "Then stop trying to leave. Then stop trying to cage me." We stood there, breathing the same air, neither willing to let go. "I'm terrified," he admitted quietly. "Every second. That they'll find a way. That I'll fail you like I failed him." "You didn't fail my father." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "He chose to save you. That was his choice." "And you?" His thumb traced my jaw. "What's your choice, Sophia?" I looked at this man who'd turned his world upside down for me, who was fighting wars he couldn't afford, who held me like I was something precious and terrifying all at once. "I don't want to leave," I heard myself say. "I want to stay. God help me. I want to stay." His kiss was gentler this time, a promise instead of a claim. "Then stay," he whispered against my lips. "Stay with me." The traitor was found 3 days later. I was in the library when Dante came to find me, his expression carved from ice. "I need you to stay in your room tonight. Don't come out, no matter what you hear." Fear crystallized in my chest. "You found them?" "Yes." A single word, but it carried the weight of an execution. "Who?" His jaw clenched. "Antonio, my father's oldest friend. Someone I've trusted for 15 years. The betrayal in his voice was raw, bleeding. "The Costas paid him $500,000, promised him territory if he delivered you." I reached for his hand. "Dante, stay in your room." He pulled away, already transforming into someone else, someone cold, someone capable of terrible things. "Please, Sophia, don't make me worry about you tonight." I did as he asked, locked myself in my room as darkness fell and listened to vehicles arriving, voices raised, a single gunshot that made me flinch, then silence that stretched for hours. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Just sat by the window watching the estate grounds, seeing shadows move with purpose, wondering what was happening in the rooms below. Around 2 a.m., Marco appeared at my door. His expression was grim. "It's done." Antonio talked, gave us everything, every family involved, every payment, every plan. He hesitated. "You should know. Dante's not himself right now. What he's about to do. I know what he is, Marco. Do you?" His eyes searched mine. Because the man downstairs, the one coordinating strikes against 3 families simultaneously, that's not the version of him you've seen. That's the version that built an empire on blood and fear. "I know," I repeated quietly. "And I'm staying anyway." He nodded slowly, then left. The rest of the night passed in terrible silence. No more gunshots, no more shouting, just the occasional vehicle leaving, carrying men to deliver Dante's brand of justice across the city. I thought about turning on the news, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Didn't want to see the body count, the warehouse fires, the casualties of a war fought in my name. Dawn broke in shades of gray and pink. The knock on my door came as the sun cleared the horizon. I opened it to find Dante standing in the hallway, still wearing last night's clothes, covered in blood that wasn't his own. His hands were stained rust red. His white shirt was ruined. There were spatters across his face, his neck. But his eyes were the worst. Empty. Distant. Like he'd gone somewhere dark and hadn't quite found his way back. "It's over," he said flatly. "The Costas are finished. The Salvatore's backed down. The Russians are negotiating terms. Antonio..." He stopped. "You don't need to know what happened to Antonio." I should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the violence written across his skin. Instead, I reached for his hand. "Come with me." I led him to his bathroom, this enormous space of marble and chrome that felt cold and sterile. Turned on the shower until steam filled the room. Then I began unbuttoning his ruined shirt with steady hands. "Sophia," his voice cracked. "You shouldn't. I'm covered in blood." "I know." I met his eyes. "I also know why. And I'm not going anywhere." He stood motionless as I stripped away the evidence of his night, revealing the man beneath. There were bruises forming on his ribs. A cut above his eyebrow. His knuckles were split and swollen. I guided him into the shower, clothes and all, and began washing away the violence. The water ran pink, then red, then slowly clear. His hands came up to grip my waist, holding on like I was the only real thing in his world. "I killed them," he whispered against my wet hair. "Antonio, the men who betrayed me." I didn't hesitate. "I know. I burned down warehouses, sent messages written in blood, destroyed families. I know. And you're still here." Wonder crept into his voice. "Why?" I pulled back enough to look at him, water streaming down both our faces. "Because my father saw something in you worth dying for. Because you've started wars to keep me safe. Because when you look at me, I'm not invisible anymore." His forehead dropped to mine. "I'm a monster, Sophia. You're a man who protects what's his." I cupped his face, forcing him to meet my eyes. "And I choose to be yours. All of it. The empire, the violence, the blood. I choose it. I choose you." The kiss was different this time. Not desperate or furious, but certain. A claiming that went both ways. When we finally stepped out of the shower, dawn had fully broken, painting the world in shades of gold. He was still a monster, still dangerous, still capable of terrible things. But he was mine. 2 weeks passed in strange peace. The city had quieted. Dante's enemies had retreated, licking their wounds, reconsidering the cost of challenging him. The estate felt less like a fortress and more like a home, though armed men still patrolled and cameras still tracked every movement. I found Dante on the terrace one evening, staring out at the city lights in the distance. He'd been quieter lately, distant in a way that had nothing to do with physical space. "We need to talk," he said without turning. My stomach nodded. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. Or maybe it is." He finally looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "The threat is gone, Sophia. The families that wanted you dead have been neutralized. Your father's enemies have either made peace or been eliminated." I moved to stand beside him. "That's good news. It means you have a choice now." His voice was carefully neutral. "One you didn't have before." "What choice?" He turned to face me fully, and I saw it then. The vulnerability he usually kept locked away. "I can give you a new identity. Papers, passport, money. Enough to start over anywhere in the world. You could be anyone, go anywhere, live a normal life." The words hit like a physical blow. "You're sending me away?" "I'm giving you freedom." His jaw clenched. Real freedom, not the illusion of safety inside a cage. You could go to college, finish your degree, meet someone who doesn't have blood on his hands, have a life that doesn't include looking over your shoulder. And if I don't want that? Something flickered in his eyes, hope quickly suppressed. "Then you need to understand what staying means. You won't be my maid. You won't be hidden. Everyone will know you're with me, that you matter to me, which means you'll always be a target, always be leverage. The enemies I make will become your enemies." "I know. Do you?" He stepped closer, intensity rolling off him in waves. "They'll come for you to hurt me. They'll threaten you to control me. You'll never be truly safe, Sophia. Never be anonymous again." "I was never anonymous," I said quietly. "I was just hiding." He was silent for a long moment, studying my face like he was memorizing it. "I need to know you understand what you're choosing. This isn't a fairy tale. I'm not going to magically become a good man. I'll still do terrible things, still make decisions that will horrify you, still have blood on my hands. I know who you are, and you're still standing here. I'm still standing here." His hand came up to cup my cheek, thumb tracing the faint scar from where I'd been hit, a mark that had started everything. "I can't promise you safety, or peace, or any of the things you deserve. What can you promise me?" His eyes held mine, ice blue and absolutely certain. "That I'll burn down the world before I let anyone hurt you again. That you'll always have a choice, even when it feels like you don't. That every decision I make, every war I fight, every line I cross, you'll know why." He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. "And that you'll never be invisible again. Not to me, not to anyone." I took his face in my still healing hands, feeling the slight roughness of stubble, the warmth of his skin. "I don't want a new identity. I don't want to run. I don't want normal. Sophia, I want this. I want you." The words came easier than I expected. I spent 3 years invisible, hiding, barely existing. And then you saw me, really saw me. Even when I was trying to disappear, you noticed. My voice cracked slightly. "How am I supposed to walk away from that?" His hands moved to my waist, pulling me closer. "You could have a real life. This is real. You and me and this impossible thing between us. That's more real than anything I've felt since my father died." I held his gaze, letting him see the certainty in mine. "So, yes, Dante. I understand what I'm choosing. I understand the danger, the violence, the impossibility of it all. And I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. And I choose you anyway. I choose this life. I choose all of it." The kiss was slow, deliberate, full of promise and possession in equal measure. "Good," he murmured against my lips. "Because I wasn't sure what I'd do if you said no. Liar, you would have let me go. Eventually." His smile was crooked, vulnerable. "After following you halfway around the world to make sure you were safe." I laughed, the sound surprising us both. "Stalker. Protector." He pulled me closer. "There's a difference." "There really isn't." His expression sobered, one hand moving to tangle in my hair. "The whole city will know, Sophia. That you're mine. That you chose this. Are you ready for that?" I thought about the invisible maid I'd been. The ghost in gray who cleaned and served and disappeared. Then I thought about the woman I was becoming. Seen, claimed, choosing danger over safety because it meant being alive instead of merely surviving. "Let them know," I said firmly. "Let the whole city know I chose you." 3 months later, I stood before a full-length mirror in Dante's bedroom, our bedroom now, adjusting diamond earrings that caught the light like trapped stars. The woman staring back was someone I barely recognized from 6 months ago. Crimson silk clung to curves I'd learned to carry with confidence. My hair was swept up in an elegant twist. The faint scars on my palms, now healed to thin white lines, were the only visible reminder of the night everything changed. "You're thinking too loudly," Dante said from the doorway, devastating in a black tuxedo that probably cost more than I used to make in a year. "Nervous," I admitted. "The fall charity gala. Half the city will be there." "Good." He crossed the room, hands settling on my waist. "Let them see you." The ballroom was exactly what I expected. Crystal chandeliers, champagne fountains, designer gowns, and enough wealth concentrated in one space to fund a small country. But it was the silence when we entered that made my pulse quicken. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. I felt the weight of hundreds of eyes tracking our movement across the floor. They all knew the story by now. The maid who wasn't. The violence that followed. The wars fought in my name. 3 families destroyed because they thought I was disposable. Dante's hand never left my waist, possessive and proud. Mr. Moretti. An older man approached, silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of legitimate businessman who probably had his own dark secrets. And this must be the famous Sophia Romano. "Miss Romano," Dante corrected, his tone pleasant but edged with warning. "Sophia, this is Vincent Castellano. He owns half the construction contracts in the city." I extended my hand, and Vincent kissed it with old-world formality. "A pleasure. I've heard so much about you." "I'm sure you have," I said smoothly, though I imagine half of it is exaggerated. Vincent's laugh was genuine. "Perhaps. But the important parts are true, yes? That you're under Mr. Moretti's protection. That you're—" He paused delicately. "Important to him." "Very important," Dante said, his fingers tightening slightly on my waist. An hour passed in a blur of introductions, careful conversations, and the subtle dance of power that defined Dante's world. I was no longer invisible, no longer someone they could look through or ignore. I was seen, acknowledged, feared even. "Sophia Romano." A familiar voice cut through the crowd, and I turned to see one of the men from that first dinner, Carlo, who'd tried to apologize while Dante shut him down. He'd lost weight, gained new lines around his eyes. "You look different." "I feel different," I said honestly. I wanted to say what happened, what we allowed to happen in that penthouse. He swallowed hard. "I'm grateful, mister. Moretti gave us the chance to make it right." Translation: grateful to still be breathing. "Changed behavior," I said, echoing Dante's words from months ago. "That's what matters." Carlo nodded, relieved, and melted back into the crowd. A journalist approached near the end of the evening, her eyes bright with curiosity barely masked as professionalism. "Miss Romano, Mr. Moretti, there's been so much speculation about your relationship. How would you describe it?" I felt Dante tense slightly, ready to deflect or dismiss. But I answered before he could, my voice clear and certain. "He protects me. I ground him." I met the journalist's gaze directly. "And anyone who threatens that balance learns exactly what we're both capable of." The reporter blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. Dante's smile was subtle, but unmistakably proud. As we left the gala, I caught our reflection in the glass doors. No longer predator and prey, or even protector and protected. We were something else entirely. Partners. Equals in a dangerous dance. "What are you thinking?" Dante asked as we drove through the city, the lights blurring past. I looked at him. This man who'd burned down the world for me, who'd given me the choice to leave and held his breath while I decided to stay. "I'm thinking about the woman I was 6 months ago. Invisible, hiding, half alive." I laced my fingers through his. And how she would never believe where I ended up. Regrets? Not one. His hand tightened on mine. "The city knows now that you're not just my maid, that you never were." "Good," I said, echoing his words from that first night. "Let them know. Let everyone know I chose this. I chose you." We pulled up to the estate. Home now, not a prison. And I realized with startling clarity that I'd found something I thought I'd lost forever. Not safety. Not peace, but purpose. Connection. A reason to be more than the ghost I'd become after my father died. As we walked inside, past guards who nodded respectfully, through halls I'd once cleaned as invisible staff, Dante pulled me close. "I love you," he said simply. Words we hadn't spoken before. Words that carried weight in his world. "I love you, and the whole city knows you're mine." I stood on my toes, kissing him with certainty that still surprised me. "And you're mine." "There's a difference." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "There really isn't." Later, lying in our bed with moonlight streaming through the windows, I traced the scars on my palms, reminders of broken glass and blood, and the night everything changed. The night Dante Moretti looked at his maid and asked, "Who did this to you?" The night the whole city learned I wasn't just his maid, I was his partner, his equal, his choice, and he was mine.